I'm a millennial, and I'm into old Harleys. It's more than just a hobby, it's a lifestyle. Everything I do is about these old bikes as I try and search for the most authentic way of living my carefully curated vintage lifestyle. During COVID, I was laid off from my six-figure Silicon Valley tech job. And then I made the most important decision of my life. I took my year's severance package and then called my dad and my hedge fund manager. I moved from Silicon Valley to a gentrified neighborhood in some Midwestern city that used to do manufacturing. Now I rent a 6,000 square foot former factory building. And in that sacred space is where I found myself. I was able to start focusing on my true passion, only building authentic, rigid frame, vintage style choppers. I document the process with film cameras on my Instagram page. Okay, I can't do that anymore. Yeah, if you've never watched this channel before, that's not who I am. I'm just being stupid. But I did want to do a video about millennials, my generation, and Harleys and choppers and how we relate to that, and how I really do think my generation and the one following it is gonna keep old Harleys alive. It just might not be exactly how your generation did it. I say your generation because I realize most of my viewers on this channel are older. My biggest viewer demographic is 55 to 64 or something like that. It's baby boomers. So I want to just sit down and talk about this. This is a topic I've wanted to do for a while. And yeah, let me move the camera. I'm on my knees. I want to actually sit on a stool and we'll talk. All right, so we're a little more comfortable now. Why did I want to do this video? A lot of times these kind of sit down and talk episodes for me are videos that are kind of inspired by conversations that I have with folks. Or sometimes it's comments that people leave here on YouTube. And occasionally I'll get comments from folks that'll be like, oh, you're a young guy, you don't know anything about this stuff. You're young, you don't understand. You don't know what it was really like back in the day. You're doing it wrong. This isn't how we used to do it in our generation. That's not how we built bikes. You're building it wrong. You're doing it different. So first of all, I think it's important to take a few seconds and kind of just define what a millennial is, right? People love to throw that word around, and I think the older generation sometimes likes to throw that around about, oh, these damn millennials, they don't know anything, as if we're still 18-year-old kids. Depends on who you ask about generation start and finish years for birth, but the youngest of us is roughly 30 years old, and the oldest of us is 45-ish. We're full-grown adults with jobs and lives and wives or husbands or life partners or whatever, and kids and houses. So yeah, there's a lot of us who are into these old bikes, or just bikes in general, that maybe have 20 years of experience doing this. I've been a full-time mechanic since 2010, and I was playing around with stuff as a hobby, and it's something fun to do on my own vehicles and my buddies for several years before that. So the idea that we're just clueless and bumbling through life and don't know how to fix anything and have no experience is really just unfounded, and I get so sick of hearing that. So yeah, I just had to kind of get that off my chest about this idea that so many people in my generation don't want to work and only have tech jobs. You got soft hands, brother. And that's really just not the case for a lot of us. Yeah, there are some folks in the vintage Harley scene that are around my age or so that are real hip, and everything does have to be curated, and they're buying $500 shredded vintage Carhartts. But for every one of those guys, there's 5 more of us building old bikes in our backyard and in a garage and in a shed. So that kind of brings me to my next thing. Like, how is my generation experiencing Harleys, and like, why are we into these bikes, and how are we going to keep this alive? Well, it's not going to be at the dealership, I can tell you that. I have a few friends who've bought brand new bikes, and you know, I know there's absolutely people my age or even younger who are going to the dealer and buying brand new bikes. But I don't think that's the reality for most of us. And I think that kind of group of guys is who is going to keep Harley going. The guys who are flipping knuckleheads, I guess more power to them. But they operate and exist in a ballpark that I can only be a spectator in. But the guys thrashing on an iron head in the garage that they bought for $1,000, that's my people, right? And I think guys like that are the lifeblood of Harleys going forward into the future. And I think for many of us too, the lure or the appeal to these old bikes is kind of something that I was talking about earlier in this video. Most all of us in my generation, like I said, are old enough to where we remember pre-internet, pre-social media times. And maybe we look back on that stuff with the same nostalgia that the baby boomer generation looks back on, you know, drive-in theaters or whatever with. And so I think that these old bikes that are fairly simple creatures or machines, however you want to look at it, and that maybe are a little more soulful than the newer stuff. It has a draw to us. Like, it maybe brings us back to some moments in childhood where things felt a little more simple. Of course, you know, you got to remind yourself that, like, these are the good old days. One day you'll be looking back now on 2025 with rose-colored glasses and saying, things were so much simpler back then. Things were so much easier. And, you know, in a world where every single day you need to be plugged in and connected in order to basically exist, it's nice to own something that doesn't need to be tethered to the internet or need more than just a battery to start. And I think that's why some of us are, like, you know, attracted to magneto-fired kickstart-only bikes. You know what I mean? Like, we have to deal with so much technology in our daily lives, whether it's for our job or just for life in general, that I think that those bikes are like a good escape and like maybe some moments of zen in an increasingly fast-paced and complex and hard to navigate and confusing world. And so there are many of us who aren't old enough to have bought a shovel head when it was brand new, but who are old enough to remember when that's what guys were still riding regularly. And there are many of us who look back on those old Easy Rider magazines with like a nostalgia for a time we never knew, and then take the time to buy the bike, learn how to work on it, spend some time with it, make it our own, and then go do those things that the guys in the magazines 40 years ago were doing it, but we're doing it now with our friends and in this world and in our way. So yeah, there might be a cell phone given GPS navigation, but you know, that's not necessarily a bad thing. You can put the navigation on to avoid interstates and go find some really cool, really good back roads. And yeah, there might be stops every so often for a photo shoot, but you know, the generations before us did that too. It's just they didn't have the instant gratification of posting it to social media. They had to go take it to 1 hour photo developing 2 weeks after they got home from their trip and then put the pictures in a 4x6 album. But I can guarantee you there's plenty of guys out there with some really cool pictures that nobody's ever seen. And the internet's awesome because it gives us meaning people existing now and riding these old bikes now, a chance to share what we've done with other people in our circle who might not ever get to see our trips and adventures. And you can swap stories and you can tell stories in ways that you couldn't in the past. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. In fact, I love it. It's like inspirational to me to watch these other guys my age like going out there and living their dream, because it makes me want to get up and go live mine. And, the point of all that is that the old bikes are a vehicle for us, not as a means of transportation from one place to another, but like a vehicle for that freedom and that, wanderlust, I think, that a lot of us have. Like, I say this a lot, and a lot of other people think this too. The motorcycle, especially the Harley Davidson, is the great American freedom machine. There is no better way to see this country than on two wheels. And I think it's pretty cool that it's still happening. There's still guys my age, while a lot of people are going to Sturgis in a trailer, there's still guys my age jumping on an old bike and ripping that thing across country and going to Sturgis with 3 or 4 other buddies, and they're all riding, Evo and earlier bikes. And that's what I mean by like how millennials will save Harley. That to me is the essence of like Harley culture, is trips and adventures and breaking down and fixing stuff on the side of the road with your buddies. And someone calls and they say, hey, you want to go riding this weekend? And you say, well, my bike's broken. They come over and help you fix it so that y'all can go ride. It's not like, it's not, hey, we're planning this trip. It's, is your bike running? Let's fix it. And then let's go ride. And that was something that happened in the past. And I think it's still happening now. Like, I'll get texts and stuff from some buddies and friends. And even people like online will send me messages on Instagram about like, I need help fixing this. And it's cool. Like, it's cool that community still exists and it's still going. Yeah. And I'm just like, I'm happy to be a part of that. So while we might not be buying bikes from the dealership, and while the dealership and Harley corporate might be scrambling trying to get younger audiences through the door, I don't really think it matters. If all the dealerships fell off the face of the planet tomorrow, it wouldn't really make a difference to me and most of my Harley buddies, because we weren't going there anyways. So yeah, like, we might kill the dealerships, but we'll definitely keep Harley culture alive in a way that I think is so much more important and so much cooler and so much more part of like Americana and American history than financing a bike to only ride it on weekends when it's sunny outside. So the next time you see a young guy with an old bike, don't just assume that he doesn't know anything about it and that he just bought it and can't possibly know anything about it. Chances are that young guy with the old bike is going to be keeping this stuff going for years and years to come. All right, so that kind of wraps up everything I had to say. It's something I've been thinking about and wanting to do an episode about. I hope I was able to articulate my thoughts in a way that kind of makes sense. I realize this was maybe a little rambly. But yeah, if you're an older person, just remember, it's not all doom and gloom. Don't believe everything you see on the TV or see on Facebook. There's a lot of young folks out there who are very much so still doing things similar to the way that your older generation did, but different. And that's not a bad thing. We're keeping this alive in our own way and experiencing life with Harleys in our own way. And sometimes it might look different than the way that you did it. But remember, what you were doing probably looked different to your parents too. You can make fun of my generation for the way we do things. You can think that we're all skinny jeans and avocado toasts and film cameras or whatever. And I don't necessarily even know that there's anything wrong with that. Like, some of that sometimes is me, and some of that sometimes isn't me. I'm definitely not like a patch-wearing 1%er motorcycle club guy, and I'm not like this big burly tough guy either. Like, I like art. I like poetry. I like girly music. There's things that I like that generations before me of men wouldn't want anything to do with. Uh, Again, it just means I'm living my life the way I want to live my life, and that's what this is all about. Just kind of finding that freedom. So yeah, I don't know. I think I'm just gonna shut up. Thanks for watching. I'll see y'all later. Bye.